Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Satan and Coffee, the Sunday edition. I hope you're all doing well. You're all having a great Labor Day weekend if you're in the States. Hope everything's going well for everyone. Good to see everybody. Good to see everybody. I know a lot of you guys don't like the long intros, but, I do the long intro so everybody has an opportunity to kind of pile in and, get into the live. So today we're going to be talking about something that I am calling Hollow Thrones. It is an expansion on something we've talked about a couple of times, but I think we're going to be diving into it a little bit differently and attacking it from a slightly different angle. One of the things that I've been noticing late when I do kind of my weekly research in YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and things like that to see what's going on. Like, what are the happenings in the occult community? And one of the things I'm noticing is an obsession, really, with all work being done with some sort of entity. Gods, goddesses, demons. We came up with the phrase Goetia-mon for people that treat the Ars Goetia like Pokemon. Like you've got to work with all of them at some point, right? And I'm just noticing that this pattern continues. It is a perpetual pattern that is happening in the occult community online. And I'm noticing that people are getting to the point of sacrificing their own sovereignty, their own agency, you know, with this obsession of needing to work with other entities. We've gone through kind of like, the ideal previously that, if your magic only works when the camera's on, or a god is watching, then, you're not practicing, you're performing. It's a performance, it's performance art, right? Gotta catch them all. The Solomonic circle, right? Exactly. you know and so today what I kind of want to do, is I kind of want to drag escapism into the light here, because that's what I look at it as. I look at it as, as a form of escapism in occult practice, and strip it down, to the bare bones, and kind of talk about rebuilding agency from zero, right? So the first thing to kind of talk about here is kind of like the symptom check, right? So if people, if you're one of these people and you're offended by this, then I apologize. But I think that, we should be able to rely on our own power and our own ability to get results, to manifest. There's nothing wrong with being a devotee of someone or something, but, I think that, it becomes a crutch. It becomes something that, you can't do anything by yourself. You always have to be working with something, right? And so, endless course hopping, like people that bounce from course to course to course, trying to learn a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Tool hoarding, we've talked about this before as well. If you're buying, all the tools that you think look cool, but you're not really using any of it, you just kind of got your ritual room just kind of, you know, set up to look nice, you know, you're, or if you're practicing what I like to call the deity of the week, right? Each week you're working with something else. Ritual procrastination is another aspect of this that we haven't really talked about. Is you procrastinate on, doing a ritual, right? You, excuse me, you hold yourself back, from doing a ritual because you're afraid that it's not going to work, right? You have some type of internalized fear about your own ability to kind of, get shit done and, do something, and what we're looking at here, we can frame this as kind of like dopamine of aesthetic or dopamine of outcome, right? So are you getting like a dopamine rush by how your altar looks, how your ritual room looks, how your ritual space looks? Like, do you get like a dopamine rush from it? Kind of like, well, I guess it would be kind of like retail therapy, right? You know, the more mystical looking shit you have in your ritual space, the happier you are with it, though it means absolutely nothing. And then, you know, dopamine of outcome, like, which is what we should be going after, right? We should be focusing on the dopamine from the outcome, right? So the actual ritual, like, you know, the end result of it, you know, there's that dopamine hit, you know, well, when you're getting set up to do it, then when you do it, and then, you know, the manifestation aspect, you know, provides a dopamine hit, knowing that it works, you know, and I think that that's where we should be focusing, you know, energy is into, you know, that dopamine outcome, right? Why would being accountable for yourself and progress be offensive? Results require dirty hands and use tools. Exactly. No, 100%. But I do know that there are going to be people out there that are going to be pissed off or irritated by this because, you know, they're going to feel called out. And if you feel called out, then you probably should be watching this, right? You know, I mean, you probably should be, you know, looking at this this live and listening to what's going on. Let's increase the brightness here a little bit. Where dark contrast, horrible. Nope. Okay, I guess we can't fuck with it. Okay, we're just gonna leave it as is. That red line. Oof, that looked horrible. That was horrid. So here's the thing. This is the question asked. This is the litmus, right? If I remove the deity name and the outfit, does the operation still function? That's the base question we're looking at, right? So if you remove the bells and the whistles from everything, right? Does it still work? Are you still getting results? Is that, you know, is it still there? Because if it's not, if it doesn't feel like it works still, then there's something that we kind of need to be looking at, right? And you know, a lot of people fall into an aesthetic trap, right? So beautiful, empty, and addictive, right? Algorithmic spirituality, right? And it is what it is. Like even if you're not posting your rituals online, even if you're not, you know, even posting your altar or your spirituality online, if you are going to Pinterest or Instagram or TikTok or YouTube and seeing other people's altars and other people's setups and saying, "Ooh, I want that. Oh, I need this. Oh, I'm going to get that. Oh, that looks cool." There's nothing wrong with appreciating the aesthetics of somebody else's setup, right? I mean, I know for like, we use them a lot, you know, as an example, but Behemoth X, you know, like I'm obsessed with that man's ritual room. But I would never attempt to do something like that. Not because I don't think that I can, but because I just don't need something like that. I think I wouldn't even know where to start with something like that. You know, I mean, it's, you know, I appreciate the aesthetic of it, but that's the thing. I don't see it as I would have more power if I had the setup that Behemoth X has. I just understand that I appreciate the aesthetic and I understand that line and that difference, that it's an appreciation of aesthetic and not that this is what I need to work, to function, right? And it definitely comes down into a thing like you need to be able to perform ritual with nothing other than the air in your lungs. That's what it comes down to. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, we sell supplies, right? You know, Dyra and I, we do the ritual flags and things like that. Do you need a ritual flag? No, you don't. You do not need a ritual flag. There is no necessity for a ritual flag. Is it a nice little thing to have? Yes. Can it be functional? Yes. Right? As long as you're using it, right? But if it's just hanging there and if you just have Hyman's sigil, Samael's sigil on your wall and you're not using it for that, you're just creating an aesthetic, like making your ritual room look like a fucking hot topic, then there's no you've lost the point, right? So No prop survives first contact. Any ritual must be executable with nothing but breath, will, and words. That is it. That is the triptych of knowing your own power, your own agency, your own ability, right? Any ritual that you perform that you use, certain things in, you use certain tools in, you need to be able to perform that ritual without those tools. Breath, will, and words. Those are the three things that you need, that you actually need to perform ritual. That is it. That's it. Air in your lungs, the will to do it, and the words to speak it. Nothing else. You don't even need fire or a candle. You don't need anything. Those are the only three things you need, right? And so there's an exercise that I've kind of come up with, right, that I think helps, right? It's like a 60-second kind of thing, right? So it's called altar blackout. So you close your eyes, visualize the entire ritual without tools. What fails? If something fails, that's dependency. You're dependent on something, and you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be dependent on your tools. You are the end all, say all creator and destroyer of your magic, right? So the cult of borrowed power, deity dependency, right? So there's nothing wrong with, again, I'm going to repeat this, there's nothing wrong with being a devotee. Exactly. Tools help focus, that's all, right? And the first thing you need to learn before you start using tools to help you focus is how to focus without the tool, right? Get your results with nothing first. The temple of the mind, right? Like we've talked about that in the past. The temple of the mind is the most important part of the ritual work. Build the temple in your mind. It is a temple that you will never lose. So it doesn't matter where you are. You can always go into that temple and you can always do your work, right? With, nothing. Now, being a devotee of something there's nothing wrong with that. Being a devotee of multiple deities or demons, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no issue. The issue comes in is when that deity or that demon or that entity becomes a crutch for you. That's where it becomes an issue. Because if you are only doing rituals or you're only doing spells when you're calling on something else, what about your power? I mean, a lot of us get into the occult because we're looking for that agency. We're looking for that sovereignty, the sovereignty, of self, our own power, our own empowerment, our own ability to do things. Control, right, is one of the things that we look for. It's live, Summer Witch. It's live. So we get into the occult because we are just overburdened with the guilt and structure and control of organized religion. And a lot of us kind of stumble onto the path, whether that's Wicca, kitchen witchery, demonolatry, whatever path you're on, left-hand path doesn't matter. We fall into it because we want to regain some semblance of control of not just our lives, but our own spirituality. And what I'm finding in the occult community is we are falling into a completely different crutch of sacrificing that sovereignty and that agency and that personal power to a demon, to an entity, to whatever, right? To, you know, whatever it is that you're devoting your practice to. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but we never say, okay, this one's for me. We never say, okay, I'm going to focus on my power. I'm going to focus on my ability. I'm going to focus on the things that I am able to do. Because at the end of the day, one of the first things that we learn is that we do have power and ability. We do have our own energy signature. We're able to use our own energy. When I do ritual for clients, most of the time, I'm not calling on anything. When I do ritual for myself, most of the time, I'm not calling on anything. When I call on an entity, whatever that entity may be, it's usually for gnosis. It's usually for an understanding, a deeper understanding of what I need to get about the world around me, about the energies moving around me. I don't ask Baphomet to do this or to do that. I don't ask Lucifer to do this or to do that. I don't ask Payman to do this and to do that. I don't ask any of them to do this or do that. I can call their energies in if I need to focus my energy into a certain task, if I'm doing something baneful, if I'm doing something, you know, for personal exploration, like talking about like a client or something like that, then yeah, like somebody wants a creative way to do something, then, you know, I might pull a little bit off of the energy of, like, for example, payment, and use that to kind of focus my energy. But the thing that I'm seeing that's happening is people are just like, yeah, I called payment and I said, hey, you know, I want to be more artistic. I want to be more creative, you know, make me more creative. That's not how this works. Like, I'm sorry, but that's not how this works. And I don't know when we started thinking it did. I've always called Christianity the lazy man's religion. And I call Christianity the lazy man's religion because you fall on your knees, you fold your hands, you bow your head, and you beg for something in your life to happen. You go to sleep, you wake up, and you do nothing about that thing that you want or need. You don't change the way that you eat. You don't exercise more. You don't look for the new job. You just put it in God's hands and say, if it is, it is. And if it isn't, it isn't. And that's why I've always called it the lazy man's religion, the lazy man's spirituality. And we're falling into that same trap with the way that we've been working with these entities. Amen. As a guide to give you perspective and focus instead of the lamp genie. Exactly, 100%. Yes, yes, the glasses came off. Evie, welcome, welcome, welcome. So yeah, it's just, these are guiding spirits. I mean, Samael used the correct word here, the correct spelling of the word here as well. So when we talk about demons, it's demon, and it comes from, so demon, that's particular spelling, if I remember correctly, that is the Latin spelling. You go further back, you get the Greek spelling, which is Daimon. They're just guiding, They're guiding spirits. They guide you. You call them in and you're like, show me a path. Show me a direction. What am I missing? There's something already inside of you, right? There's something that already exists in you that needs to be pulled out. And you get that direction. And you begin to see things differently, right? I feel like demonic work, entity work, God work, it has become way too literal. Way too literal. And it has never worked that way. You can't create something from nothing. Very much like you can't destroy energy that already exists. If something already exists, that energy can't be destroyed. It transforms, it transmutates, it goes through a metamorphosis, but it can't be destroyed. And the same goes with energy, that it, as far as its creation, can't be created from nothing. It has to transform. That alchemy has to happen. There has to be some type of alchemical change that takes place for something to be created or to change. It can't just be like, you can't not have a creative bone in your body and be like, I want to be creative. You can transform energy out into creative energy. But it's the idea, if you have the idea in your mind that you're going to just, it exists. No, it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. It never has. It never will. And we need to stop using entities as crutches. You need to believe in your own energy, your own power, your own ability. Like, the reason I got this tattoo on my left hand, it's not just art. It's not just aesthetic. This is my tool. This is my tool. This right here. This is my tool. Beyond the athame, beyond the wand, beyond the candles and the incense and everything else, this is my tool. This is what I use. My own power, my own ability, my own focus goes into everything that I do. I have never used an entity as a power-up. I've never used an entity as the focal point of energy to use their energy in ritual. And this is also another reason I think it's also important to understand. This is why sometimes, depending on the rituals that we're doing, they take time. They take repetition. Some rituals don't work after the first try, the first go. You have to keep putting that energy out there. And yes, your energy is finite. I don't ever suggest somebody go through a 12-hour ritual. You know, go into ritual for an hour, 2 hours max, rest up a couple of days, go back into it, and keep repeating that ritual until you get the results that you need from your own energy. Background nation. Born and raised, being told no one can walk for you. One may walk with you, but never for you. This is adjacent meaning. That is actually really, really cool. That's really cool. My grandmother is is Native American, like full on. Um, it's much as I know, it's that she's Mohawk. Um, there was another oh, word that she used to describe it that wasn't Mohawk, but that's what I know it to be. Which I guess makes me 25% because my grandfather's French. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how that happened, but my grandmother's Native American, my grandfather's French. Weird shit. Like, so, you know. Um, but there was a lot about my spirituality growing up um, that came from her, you know. Um, that is a completely irrelevant question, fireman. Um, and so one of the things that always stuck with me with my grandmother was at dinner time. So we would always give thanks, but we would never give thanks to God. We would always give thanks to the animal that was on our plate, is what we would do. Something that, like, my grandmother made all of her kids do, all of her grandkids, anytime we would eat at my grandmother's house. If there was an animal on that plate, we would always give thanks to the animal for allowing itself to be sacrificed so we can keep breathing and keep going. So a lot of my spiritual ideals come from things that she has told me. So yeah, there's a lot of I mean, this is gonna sound like it's kind of dumbing it down, I suppose, but that woman could come up with some like one-liners that just kind of set you back as a teenager. You're just kind of like, oh, like it's a one-liner, but it's like it's deep, and you just kind of sit there and you kind of makes you like question your entire existence while you're watching Saturday morning cartoons or eating breakfast cereal. Like, so yeah. Um, moving forward. So the cult of borrowed power, right? Deity dependency. So we're looking, the distinction here is partnership versus abdication, right? So we have the concept of being theistic and then worshipful helplessness. Did know briefly. Yeah, she's great. She has dementia. She's like on kind of like the beginning stages of dementia, so she's starting to kind of forget things. So it was a sad diagnosis to get. She's still there. She's still she's still present most of the time, but there are things that you begin to notice as time progresses. Um, you know, grandma's existential quotes. Let's go. Right. I'll put some thought into like the things that I grew up and heard. Um, that she told me. And I might do an episode just kind of going down the line of these quotes. So again, partnership versus abdication, theism versus kind of worshipful helplessness. And here's the thing is you become helpless if you put too much stock into the entities that you work with, if you're leaning too far into the crutch of the deities, the entities, the demonics that you are working with, that you are, you know, re- giving reverence to, that you are worshiping, you are creating a helpless situation for yourself. Mm-hmm. 100% Evie. So, use case for like demons and gods, right? They're amplifiers. They're not engines. They're allies, not like, I guess the best way to put it, they're not CEOs, right, of your fate, right? The things that you work with, whether it's a god, a goddess, a demon, you know, whatever it is that you're working with, it is not like the end all be all of your fate. And they are not the engine that is driving your practice. They can be allies, they can be amplifiers, they can be guides, but you always must maintain your sovereignty, your agency in your practice. Always. Never lose focus on the idea that it is you that is doing the work. Never miss that. Never let yourself believe that if you don't call on this, don't do that, and nothing's going to work. One of the things that I loved about, the beginning of my practice when I started, my path in paganism, right, was the connection to nature, was the ability to step outside on a windy day, close my eyes, and just feel everything. Like everything, it turned into a song and dance. I could feel the wind. I could hear it. I could hear the birds, the trees, how they rustled. Like everything just melded together in beautiful unison. And it wasn't that I could feel necessarily energy around me, but the fact that I understood that I was a part of everything that was happening around me, that I was inherently connected to everything and everyone. That there wasn't a single thing that existed that wasn't connected to me or I wasn't connected to it. And the feeling inside of myself, again, was an understanding that all of that was my energy. Some of it external to me and around me, some of it inside of me, but at the end of the day, it was all mine. Like I didn't have to tap in to get that energy. It was already there. I already had access to it. I inherently had access to it. I sometimes understand it like Trident, the combined entity that comes into existence because of work. Yeah, I mean, it can work that way. And so at the beginning of my practice, when I began to kind of understand those things, like that sensation, I was able to kind of tap into, that flow, that ebb and flow of things. There was so much that I understood. when I started actually tapping into other energy signatures. So we're talking external entities. We're talking Samael. We're talking Lucifer. We're talking, Baphomet. We're talking Payman, Belial, all of these things. Those are tapping into external energy signatures. Those external energy signatures are different from the signatures that just exist. And what happens is you can take those and you can use those to focus the energy that just exists internally and externally and guide that energy into what you need. That's it. The energy from these entities isn't the end all be all of your work, right? And, another aspect of this is also allowing yourself the freedom to reach into the void and see what comes back, right? There's a post I'm actually working on for Instagram and TikTok and YouTube Shorts that'll be coming up probably today at some point of 6 entities that when I over the course of a couple of years, reaching out into the void, just seeing what comes through, what I get. A few things came back, got some names, got some sigils, and I'm going to be putting those out there for people to look at. It's not inherently saying, hey, work with these things, but it's just saying that there are things that we can learn from and grasp from, grow with. Again, they're not crutches. They're just understanding what's out there, what exists, right? And I think rolling back here a little bit, a good exercise and I know people say this as like a rude statement, but I'm not meaning this as a rude statement, but I do think a lot of us need to go back outside and touch some grass. Like we need to walk outside barefoot and touch some dirt. Go to a park and sit at the base of a tree. Lean your head on that tree and just connect. Just connect. Connect to yourself. Connect to all of that energy that exists around you. Just touch it. It's there. There's so much of it, and you're connected to it. We have an invisible umbilical cord connected to Gaia. Yeah, I go with Gaia, Mother Earth. We have an invisible umbilical cord that keeps us tethered to Mother Earth. And I think the sad thing is with the occult community currently, and I am a theistic left-hand path demonologist. I work with the demonic. I revere the demonic. I worship the demonic. But even in that work, I cannot deny the inevitable, inherent connection that us as human beings have to the earth. And the necessity that regardless of the path that you are walking, it is a connection that needs to be nurtured as much as possible. Because when we begin to deny that connection that we have to the earth and to nature and the energies that exist around us, when we begin to try to disconnect ourselves from that, whether intentionally or unintentionally, when we begin to disconnect from that, is we begin to see a downfall in our own practice. And what happens is we start to lose the connection to that energy, and our paths begin to feel deadened. They begin to feel gray. And we keep pushing ourselves harder and harder, further down different paths to try to find a connection. When the connection's already there, we're not doing it in the right way. Everything else that we connect to is a complement to what we're already connected to. Topics from this live are video material, to be honest. Yeah, I agree. And I am going to start doing more pre-recorded content as well. That is going to be a thing. It's going to be slow at first, but once the once I get into the flow of it, be pretty consistent. So definitely, I feel we should never allow ourselves to fully disconnect from that earth connection, from the nature that exists. Because to this day, like, I walk outside and it could be a still day, sun is shining, and just feel it. You feel that connection. Now, I mean, grant you, yes, part of that is definitely going to be vitamin D, right? Our bodies do not produce it by itself. We need sunlight to produce vitamin D. So yes, 100%. You go outside and you get some vitamin D from the sun, right? Your body starts to ramp that production up because of the sun rays, and depression definitely fades. I'm not going to sit here and say that that is a fix it for antidepressants, but for some of us, it helps. And yes, there is a biological connection. There is a chemical reaction that happens when the sun hits us. But I think that in and of itself is inherently spiritual. I think the reason that happens is that dopamine production, that's production of serotonin from sunlight, gives us the ability and opportunity to connect spiritually with the world around us, the natural world around us. Because not only does it produce that serotonin, dopamine reaction, but inside of that serotonin, that dopamine reaction, the mind opens. Focus opens. Ideas flow. A lot of things happen when we're connected to nature. So it's definitely something to look at. And so here's another thing. So as you know, as you all might already know, I like getting into the psychology of this stuff, right? So the next thing we're going to get into is psychology under the hood of this, okay? So what we're doing here is, so the first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at internal locus of control versus learned helplessness. Okay. So your internal locus is like, so my actions drive outcomes. External locus is fate, spirits, planets decide, and then I react. Learned helplessness is after repeated failures or perceived lack of control, you stop trying. Even when control returns, it feels rational, but it's a trained paralysis. So that's what we're looking at. So internal locus, external locus, and then learned helplessness. Okay. Now, how this shows up in Magick is, so for example, just some examples, I can't do money work until the waning moon passes. That's external locus. If X deity doesn't answer, nothing moves. Outsourced agency, right? You're outsourcing your agency. You're outsourcing your power. I did 3 rituals, nothing changed, so why bother? Hopelessness loop, right? Sometimes when we do ritual, we're not going to get the results that we want. the results that we're asking for, but there's other things that need to be kind of looked at. Maybe you're asking the wrong questions. There are things that cannot be changed. There are things that cannot be moved magically. So maybe you're asking the wrong questions, right? Focusing on the idea that if you call or you invoke or evoke an entity and that entity doesn't answer, that you can't do anything now because there's no answer, you're denying yourself your own ability and your own power in what it is that you're doing. Right. And same thing, like when we look at like stuff like, for example, I can't do money work until the waning moon passes, right? Like it has to be a waxing moon. It can't be waning away. It has to be waxing and getting bigger, for growth and stuff like that. Do things like that play a role, like the moon phases and stuff like that? I do, but I don't believe that it plays a role the way we think it does. Like, I don't think it's so like absolute. Because I've done, new moon money rituals or spells. I've done full moon, money spells, and they both have, consistent, results, right? Not to the same degree, but if you need to do a money spell, then just do a money spell, right? Um, Money spell always works for me, right? It's gonna sound very new agey, but it has always worked for me. Cast iron cauldron, a clean one. Could be a small one. Doesn't need to be a big one. Usually small ones work better. Silver coin, size of a $50. Actual silver, not like I've tried it with nickel and stuff like that has like a silver look to it, or stainless steel coins. I don't get the same results. A silver coin. So if you get like I don't know, like if you buy like a silver coin, like, like the ones that they sell online and stuff like that, like for like, whatever. Fill the cauldron with water, clean, clear water. Okay. You want to go the extra mile, use distilled water, but water from the tap works just fine. Place the coin in the water, heads up, heads down, doesn't matter. On a full moon, let the light of the moon shine on that coin, but like, direct on that coin, and then put out your petition and do your petition 3 times. Every time I do that spell, every time I do that, it works in varying degrees. Sometimes, it's $5. Sometimes it's $5,000. But in varying degrees, that spell has always worked for me. And within 24 hours, 24 to 72 hours max, results come through on that thing. Always. So, little spell for you guys. That has always worked very well for me, right? And this is using energy that already exists in the world, right? Like I didn't call on a god or a goddess or a demon or anything like that. I just put it out there. Just my own energy, connected my energy to the energy around me, and I just let it go. Just let it go out into the ether, and the universe responds in kind. So it's something about, silver and full moon and the way the light I don't know, but it works. It always works. Right? It's one of the first spells I've done. Back when I was like 14. It has always worked since then. Like I still do it regularly, when something comes up. Or sometimes, here's an important thing. Here's an important thing. Sometimes it's not the actual money. Sometimes it's an idea that pops in your head and you're like, hey, I can use this to make money. And you do. So please understand the way magic works is nobody is going to drop a briefcase off at your house with 10 grand in it because you did a spell. It's not literal. That's not how magic works. Sometimes your job gives you a raise. Sometimes you find $5 on the ground. Sometimes you get an idea and you make a couple grand. It depends on how the universe decides to say, this is what you need, what you want, and this is what I'm giving to you. And always make your petitions realistic. Because if you do a spell like that and you ask for $1 million, I promise you're not going to find $1 million laying on the street. But you might get $1 million idea. But at that point, you're not talking about immediate manifestation. You're talking about the manifestation of an idea and then the work that is necessary to go into that idea to allow the endpoint manifestation happen. So you're talking about anywhere from a year, 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 for that to fully manifest. And then the spell is only a very small fraction of what is actually going to take place or what is actually going to develop and manifest from that. Because most of it is going to be your legwork, footwork, and the groundwork that you put in to the ideas and the things that you're doing. Right? It's always very important to understand spells and rituals have varying degrees of results, and they're not always immediate manifestable ideas that are like visual fireballs that land in front of you. But I also suppose that's also depending on how you look at how your own mind works. Because I look at $1 million ideas as being mental fireballs of manifestation that happen because of this type of work. Moving forward, okay, so the flip technique, right? So this is like a 10-minute sovereignty reboot that you can do. Okay, like if you're having a problem with your own agency, your own, touching base with your own power, right? Name a target, one concrete outcome in 7 days. So, for example, if you're somebody that is running your own business, you have a consultancy business or something like that, 3 paid consults booked, right? Or 3 readings booked or something like that. Right? So name one like concrete outcome for the next 7 days that you need to put work into. Now, a sphere of control audit. Control, outreach count, offer clarity, booking link, follow up, influence, time of day that you do a direct message, who you pitch to, social proof used, right? Things of that nature. No control. This is something you don't have control over. You have to audit this stuff. Someone's mood, algorithm spikes, Mercury's mood swings. Okay? So it sounds like I'm giving you a business model, but I'm not. Okay, this is a sovereignty reboot. So what you're looking at is, what do you have control over? What do you not have control over? What is influencing, the possibility, like from what is influencing from you and what is influencing from the external, the results within the 7-day time period, right? And what are just the things that you just have no control over whatsoever? Zero control, right? And then commit to 3 controllables that you will do today. right? So look at 3 things that you can do today that you know that you have control over that you're going to do. Now, this can be super complex or this can be super simple. This could be as simple as make the bed, take a shower, wash the dishes. 3 controllables, 3 things that you have control over. It could be, if you're talking your spiritual practice, this could be meditate, write my book of shadows, do ancestor work. 3 controllables. Each and every day, focus on 3 controllables that you have, that you can control, that you know you control, that you control the outcome of, and do them. Make sure that you do them. Just 3 things every day, however small, however big. Wake up, brush your teeth, get dressed. 3 controllables every single day. Focus on those. Focus on 3 controllables every day. And then allow those things to expand. Allow them to grow, right? Focus on 3 controllables every day. Build the habit. Change the controllables. And you're probably sitting there thinking, what the hell does this have to do with spirituality, working with demons, casting spells, things like that? It is the idea of focusing on the things that you know that you control 100%, that you know that you can dictate the outcome of certain things. And it is allowing that power, that personal power inside of yourself to grow to the point of understanding where the full level of your ability is and fully allowing yourself to connect to everything around you and use your own energy. You're eventually getting to the point of going into a full-on ritual and not even thinking about invoking or evoking an entity. You're invoking yourself, your own power, your own ability. Breaking away from the tools and using your energy and your physicality as the tool. Bind the ritual to those behaviors. Power equals intention, behaviors, right? So bind the ritual to those behaviors. 3 behaviors that you control every day. Bind your rituals to your behaviors, to the things that you can control. Power equals intention. Okay? So an example of this, right? Of a before and after of what I'm getting at here. So before, Belial will break my stagnation. That's a before statement, right? Belial will break my stagnation. This entity will do this thing for me. After, Belial stands with me while I send 15 pitches, refine 1 irresistible offer, and follow up 2 times. If I do the verbs, the world flinches. So the metric rule here is results measured as verbs executed first, outcomes second. If the verbs rise and outcomes stall, adjust the verbs, not the deity. Thought we should be step of help will be given to those that help themselves. Energy will be given to someone who is willing. Exactly. So to keep it simple, before, Belial will break my stagnation. After of this exercise, the changing the psychology of it, changing the perspective of it, Belial stands with me while I do the work, which is what we want, right? We want our work with these entities to be, they are walking this with me. They are assisting me and guiding me, not doing things for me. Because at the end of the day, especially in the left-hand path, you cannot preach personal accountability and personal responsibility when you're almost 100% leaning on entities to do things for you. And I completely agree with you, Maeve. Yes. Help will be given to those that can help themselves. Energy will be given to someone who's willing to put it into good use, or even to allow, like, to use their own energy, to put their own energy forth. More energy will be given. Right? So now, as I always like to do, the Jungian perspective here, right? Jung's participation mystique, right? Inflation now, collapse later, right? So, participation mystique, what is this? You merge with an archetype or deity so tightly, you lose boundaries. It feels godlike. That's the inflation, right? Then reality invoices you, and that's your collapse. That's your fall, right? So that's participation mystique, right? So again, you merge with an archetype or a deity so tightly, you lose your own boundaries. You have that initial inflation. This feels godlike. This feels amazing. And then, boom, reality check, and you crash. Theistic Left-Hand Path stance with this. You ally with the current. You do not become the current. Okay. Speaking of action and how you talked before about money spells, it's like how wealth is the ability to do fabric of action and ownership, gold, the shine, ability in all things. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with you, Samuel. So, symptoms of inflation: sudden grandiosity, contempt for mundane effort, risky life decisions because the demon chose me, quote unquote, sleep wrecked, appetite gone, social impulsivity, right? The bill, the collapse, the invoice, the reality check, burnout, shame, cynicism, ritual avoidance. Magic doesn't work, right? So these are ideas, these are like kind of like more on a psychological base of how you can kind of figure out whether or not maybe you're crutching on an entity too much. Okay. So, anchor exercise. I'm giving you guys a lot of exercises today. Okay. So, here's an anchor exercise: stand, inhale through the nose, 4, hold 2, exhale 8. Right. So, if you guys don't understand what the numbers mean, 4 seconds, 2 seconds, 8 seconds, right? Stand, inhale through your nose for 4 seconds, hold it for 2 seconds, exhale for 8 seconds. Name 3 objects in the room out loud. Press tongue to palate, feel heels. Ground yourself. It's a grounding exercise. And yes, it is spiritually relevant. Okay? If you feel yourself falling into the pattern of being too reliant on an entity, and you have certain aspects or certain things that you're feeling or experiencing while doing this work in the way that you're doing it, ground yourself. Now, the anchoring exercise is also really good. Like, honestly, like if you're just stressed, if you're just freaking out, if you just feel disassociated, like a lot of us I know have after ritual sensation of disassociation. The anchoring exercise is really, 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 really that. Again, stand, sit, stand. Okay. Barefoot, preferably. Dig your heels into the ground. Right? Um, right. So inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. Exhale 8 seconds. Name 3 objects in the room. No, it's my actual background. Green. It's an actual background. My kitchen is right over there. Um, Dining room tables. But no, yeah, no, it's not a screen. It's my actual background. My wheels are now stuck. Okay, so what you can speak to this, okay? I am allied to the current. I am not consumed by it. Again, I repeat, I am allied to the current. I am not consumed by it. Right? So, just the off example, right? So, working current, right? Felt invincible, trash schedule, posted erratically, then crashed. Fix wasn't more offerings, it was boundary. Session caps, sleep return, daily verbs, invoke as voltage, not identity. But if you find yourself wanting to be consumed by it, then I would say that you need to ask yourself, is that actually you? That is a moment to take a step back and say, is this me? Is this something that I truly desire? Is this my desire? Is this something creeping its way in? Run. And there are moments in magic, in ritual work, where allowing yourself to temporarily be consumed by an energy can be necessary. However, I would not, under any circumstances, say that it is normal, regular, patterned behavior when doing ritual work or working with an entity. If you find yourself wanting to be consumed by something else's energy that's not yours, then I would say whatever it is that you're working with might not be what you think it is that you're working with. And the exchange is definitely not a 50-50. Because if you are going to be all consumed by that energy, what are they getting from you? Like I've talked about this a lot. We talk about offerings and stuff like that. Most of what happens during these exchanges when we work with gods, goddesses, and demons, it's an energetic exchange. And it's very rarely ever a 50-50 exchange, right? We usually take more than we give. And the idea here is there are going to be times where they're going to want more than what they're going to give. The problem is we are finite. We're not built of the same energy. And it can have devastating consequences to the physical self. Not to mention the psychological and spiritual, but the physical self, the finite aspect of who we are. It can have very detrimental effects. Again, there are times, situations, and circumstances where having an all-encompassing, fully consumed ritual is necessary, makes sense, and there's definitely things that we can take advantage of in those situations. I think that you finding yourself wanting to be consumed by something, by that energy, you as the practitioner need to examine the situation and say, is this appropriate? That's what I would say. I would leave it on you. I'm not going to say you should or you shouldn't, but I would say proceed with caution and go from there. So going forward a little bit more, right? Where are we at? Oh, wow. We are definitely over time, guys. And we're not even like halfway through this. Like, I mean, we're still in like the psychology section of this, right? So the next one is the protocol, invoke, and then de-identify, right? So partner with, the purpose of this is partner with the entity or archetype for amplification, then clearly return to sovereign self. No residue, no inflation. right? Which is kind of to the point of what you're talking about there, Evie, right? So intent, limits, and offer. Exactly. I think that we should definitely roll with this into a part two. I really want to keep going with it, but there's a lot more to go to because we're, like I said, we're still in the psychology part of it. And then, I have something for you guys called a 7-day sovereignty sprint. So it's a day 1 to day 7, right? So, aesthetic audit, blackout working, behavior pact, language fast, friction burn, data check, and then reintroduction over the course of 7 days. For that, there's also other aspects. Yeah, there's other aspects to go through. Um, case files, things that I've gone through, things that I've seen, felt, and stuff like that. Dealing with my own stuff. There's also a couple other rights. Sigil of self. I also have something in here to how to come up with your own sigil, your own personal empowerment sigil that you can use in ritual. It's another aspect of things that I was kind of looking at is, we like to talk about sigils a lot when we like to talk about demonic sigils and things like that. But I think that we all should have our own sigil, like of us, our own power to call on, right? To always remind us of the power that we have. So anyway, there's a lot that we can go over come Wednesday, right? So for the next episode of Satan and Coffee. For today, that is going to be it. I do hope that you guys found it helpful. Yes, full on self deification. Exactly. It is great to see some new faces. Summer Witch, thank you very much for coming in. Samael, thank you. Good to see you. Maeve, always. So Wednesdays and Fridays, Satan and Coffee is at 6:30 Mountain Standard Time. Sundays is 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So yeah, so I do 3 episodes a week: Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. Right. So you guys have been fucking great. Thank you all for being here. And as always, hail thy fucking self. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, everybody. Bye-bye. AM, 6:30 a.m. in the morning.